Today I'm talking to Eirik Norman Hansen. He's a futurist, an author, an entrepreneur, an advisor, a self described technology optimist. There aren't many of those left these days. He has multiple podcasts and channels, one of them called 30 Minutes into the Future, which we have to find out what that means today, where he helps people get ready for the future, which I love the sound of that. So Eirik has a background in economics, also in law, and also in AI research and futurism. And today we're going to discuss the intersections of these things and the impact of AI on the future. So welcome, Eirik.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. So excited.
Yeah, so all right, Eirik, let's just dive right in. You're already a cyborg. Okay, you already have technology embedded in you and microchips and so forth. So tell us about this. What do they do? And what do other people think about this when they hear about it?
Let's start with what people think about it, because when I told it the first time, I was picked
Uh-huh.
up by the Norwegian Broadcasting Service, and they did an article on that, and it was actually three pretty distinct different reactions. The most common one are ordinary people like you and I. Some were excited about it, others a bit skeptical but very rational. Then we had the bullies, and I don't need to talk about them because they're just trolls about everything. And then we had one group that thought this was a sign from God, because there's something in the
Mhm.
Old Testament, I think, the article of the devil's mark. And then so that was kind of the, but back to the serious part of it. um, I found that people were curious. They thought that it was interesting that I did it. They wondered what they could use it for. Some were very skeptical. And then again, based on lack of knowledge, because they thought now that I could be tracked everywhere. But
Mm.
the technology we use in these chip implants are NFC, or near field communication technology, the same thing as you have in your access card. And there's no battery. It's a passive technology, so it needs to be activated by some kind of reader, like your
Mm.
phone or a touchpad to enter a building. So all in all, most people are they're curious, excited about it. Some are skeptical. Most people find it very interesting, and
What
especially,
do they do? Tell me
yeah.
what
So
they yeah.
yeah, and that was the point, because I did a survey. I asked 1,000 people, and that was just out of my curiosity before I knew that you could actually have one. And then I asked people if they would like to have a chip implant if it was not dangerous. That was the only thing I asked for. And then 13% out of the 1,000 I asked said that, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And the interesting thing was, when we asked them why, they didn't talk about tracking and security. They talked about, the idea they had for what they could use it for. And then someone told me that there was a guy in Sweden doing this. And I went to Stockholm, met Hannes. He had, at that point, started a company who, together with the University Hospital of Stockholm, was doing research on the possibility of using implants to survey your body for health reasons. And they needed a guinea pig. So, and that's, I was there. Before I knew it, I ended up in a piercing studio in Stockholm Centrum, city center. Never been to a piercing studio before. Wonderful guy. He implanted the first chip in my hand, and that was just to
Mm.
see if it worked. And we got contact with it. The other one I got was with a light bulb on it. And the reason they wanted to do that was to see if they could run a sensor, because there's no, as I said, no battery in the chip. The chip is powered when you take a reader like your phone against it, and then it creates a induction effect that generates enough energy in the chip to make it readable and also to light the light bulb. So that's pretty cool. You can see the light through my skin. And when they managed to do that, they created the purpose of the survey was to figure out if they could create a chip that I have under here, under my collarbone, I think you call it, with a temperature sensor. And
Mm.
that's connected and encrypted against my phone and an app that I have, so I can measure my temperature. And the next phase of this project would be to see if you can use, for instance, machine learning to determine my baseline. And then you can start to predict if your temperature is changing this pattern. It could be an indication that you are about to get a cold, or if you have this disease, that could be a trigger. So the purpose of the project was to see if we could use it for health reasons. The fun part of it is that I can now open the door at my office. I can share my business card through my chip in my hand,
Mm.
and fun stuff like that. So
Oh, cool.
partly fun, but at the end of the day, it was actually a pretty serious research project.
Mm. I've got a question for you. What is digitalization, which is something that you study?
Yeah, yeah. For me, that's, about how we can use technology to transform a process or a service or a product, and enhance it in some way, make it better, easier to use, more valuable, something in that area. And I think that
Hmm.
my favorite kind of digitalization example was amateur an amateur comedian theater in Spain. They did a project with a little company because they had a hard time selling tickets. Because one of the big challenges being an amateur comedian is that I don't know if you're funny. And if I don't know if you're funny, I don't want to use like $35 for an evening watching
Hmm.
you. So they came up with this new solution, selling tickets without selling ticket. It was free. So you entered
Hmm.
the room as a guest, and when you sat down in the room, on the back of the seat in front of you, there was a tablet, and on that tablet, you had to register with your name and your credit card information. Then, when the show started, they used the camera on the tablet to watch your face and something called emotion tracking. So if you laughed, then
Mm.
you have to pay. So they created the world's first pay per laugh solution. And
Mm.
that's, what they did was moving the risk from the customer over to them as a vendor. If they didn't, provide what they promised, I didn't have to pay. If they did, I had to pay.
Mhm.
And what do you call that? As a result of that, they also saw that they could use or build a platform, creating new products and services that they couldn't do before, like, make a subscription for 1,000 laughters a month. Or, so a complete new way of selling tickets. What they could have done, what they didn't, was to use the data they collected and analyze that, and to, see when are people laughing. What are they laughing about?
Mm.
Are there more laughter in the early evening show than the late evening show, for instance? So that's kind of digitalization for me, where we use technology to enhance or improve or make something better. And then there's a bunch of other, like this thing here or whatever. And I think that's the important thing of it.
Yeah. In the Metamind here, we're really focusing on generative intelligence and on these new kinds of, I don't even call them technology anymore. It's like intelligence, it's like an intelligence technology or something. It transcends. It's the biggest thing I think that's ever happened. And so for you, what is generative intelligence? How do you think about it, and how do you represent it in your mind, and how do you relate to it?
Yeah, I think that, generative AI or generative intelligence is about, the ability to create new stuff based on data that system or platform or algorithm has been trained on. And um, for me, that's a very, very powerful tool that can help us to make things, services, information, education more accessible for more people.
Mm.
Uh, because now we have, AI has been around for ages, basically, but oftentimes the output hasn't been for, everyone, because that's, hardcore data scientist stuff. Now, with generative intelligence on top of that, we can use that to transform things into understandable, accessible information or actions that everyone can take part of.
Mm. Yeah, I really like that. Generative intelligence makes information accessible, more accessible. It makes it also makes kind of potential information more accessible, right? The Yeah, or even kind of higher dimensions of information more accessible to us. Yeah, and if you understand, go ahead.
Yeah, no, no, and I just like you're saying, because oftentimes we are asked to read a very advanced, expert written report on something. And
Hmm.
if I'm not educated within that area, it's pretty hard to understand. Like, law firms, a lawyer or a doctor talking to or writing something to a patient, you almost every time have to be a doctor to understand what they're saying. And that's the simplest thing. You can just, process that now, make some kind of chat GTP for that matter, explain to you in a normal voice, what does this mean? Uh, and then when we're seeing, companies now are starting to use this to create onboarding educational systems that will adapt to the level of understanding that you actually have to make, things more understandable. And I think that's one very important aspect, at least.
Hey, quick question for you. What are you learning from this interview? And what do you want to learn next? Well, you probably want to stay ahead of the curve with AI just like we want to. And we want to be your top resource for interesting, cutting edge AI tools and knowledge here on Metamind. We're finding and interviewing interesting experts from different worlds, different industries. And then we're using this knowledge so we can keep up with AI and improve our success, improve our quality of life. So stay with us on this journey. So, first, click on the subscribe button, which you'll find under the video, so that YouTube puts this into your feed when we release new interviews with AI experts. And if you're enjoying this interview, please give me a like to let others know that this is the real deal. And also, if you know someone who's interested in what we're talking about here, then send this interview to them so that they can learn with you. And I also want to hear from you. So go down to the comments below and let me know, what's your favorite prompt or prompting technique? What are your favorite AI resources or tools? What are you learning from this conversation? Do you disagree with anything we're saying here? And also, what else would you like to learn? Who would you like me to interview here on Metamind? All right, well, go and subscribe, leave me a comment below, and back to our interview. Yeah, that's something I've noticed when people are interacting with the generative intelligence. They don't realize that it can do kind of multiple layers, and you can ask it to explain something just to you, and you can tell it about you so that it can put it into terms that you can relate to, which is just spectacularly powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you love technology. You're just fascinated with it. You're a self-described technology optimist. Well, first of all, what is a technology optimist? What do you see a techno optimist? What's your vision of it?
My vision, and that's kind of something I decided intentionally to focus on being, because I think it's important that we kind of look at technology and try to figure out how can we use this in a responsible and useful way that benefits everyone. There are obviously stuff that we can use, or someone can use technology to do bad things, but we could also I don't think that should get in the way of the tremendous opportunities or possibilities we have. And especially now, we have never ever lived in a time where we have so many opportunities as we do right now because of technology, and that's just enhancing and improving all the time. We have never ever either had so many challenges as we do right now, and we know that technology used in a responsible way will help us fix a lot of those challenges that we have. So
Mm.
for me, it's about, there's so often when something new, like when ChatGPT was launched 1.5 years ago, the first response from the general community and from the news was to talk about all the bad things you could use it for, how you use that to create fake news, to, trick your way to school, to blah, 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 which is like, yeah, but what about all the good things? Like Anne, the woman with the stroke, who now has a voice because of that same kind of technology. Shouldn't we then
Mhm.
focus on that instead? So I think that's important. And also, it's people are, and I think that's natural, when you see all these kinds of technologies, and we've seen this, over and over and over again. When robots came around, we were afraid of losing our jobs. When we started to get smarter systems, we were afraid of losing our jobs. Now people are afraid of losing their jobs. When I explain to them what you can use generative AI for, and what you cannot use it for, some people are quite disappointed because they have this idea, because they thought it was a oracle and could do amazing, impossible stuff. And I say, yeah, but weren't you afraid of losing your job? Yeah, but it would have been nice though. So I think it's important to kind of realize what this really is and how we can use it in a good way.
What are the things that people are surprised that it can't do?
The first thing, and that's maybe one of the things that worries me right now, is that people think that it is a search engine. So
Mm.
I ask, and especially if you have the free version and you ask it about something, it will give you an answer, and oftentimes a very well articulated answer. So if you don't know the answer, that looks like the right thing, and we know that that's not, most probably it's not entirely true, at least what's it
Hmm.
saying, because it's not a search engine. And that's, I think, one of the most disappointing things. When I also, when we tell them that it's not really updated on the last couple of years, they're quite surprised about that. Then it doesn't really know how to differentiate between the truth and what's not true, because that's not what it built for. It's basically a language creator. But then when you start to use it the proper way, connected to your data sources, then it's another thing. But in general, that's maybe the thing that most people are disappointed, that what can't it?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It doesn't know the difference between what's true and what's not true, in a sense. Yeah, and it hallucinates, and it's I think they say it's confidently wrong, and yeah.
Yeah, and I had a very, fun, two very, amusing examples on that. When it was launched, I was a guest in a podcast like that was live, which was kind of extra funny. And for some reason, we started to talk about why did the first Apple computer, why was it called Macintosh? And none of us remembered. So we thought, we have this new wonderful tool. Let's ask ChatGPT, and it came up with a very, convincing story that the reason was that Steve Jobs had a colleague who went to Scotland and he bought a raincoat that was made out of the fabric that was very durable and sustainable, and they liked that, so that's why they called the first computer Macintosh. And the guy who created that raincoat, his name was Gregor Macintosh or something. And it has nothing to do with reality, but it
No.
looked like a very convincing story. And so that's interesting. Another one was when I asked him to create a presentation of me based on a profile text that I had, and obviously ChatGPT thought that it wasn't good enough, so it added a section explaining that Eirik Norman Hansen, he has also been a lot in Silicon Valley helping the important startups to succeed in the world. Never done that. It looked cool,
Mm.
but I had never done that. So that's the thing that we need to, and that's disappointing for a lot of people.
Okay, so along the lines of getting ready for the future, which you like to help people get ready for the future, I understand. How is AI, how's generative intelligence going to impact us at the individual level, at the group level, at the collective level? Well, let's just start there. How do you see it impacting us in the coming, 3, 5, 10 years?
Yeah. First of all, I know that now, after a year of having access to this, for most people, we see that it starts to mature a little bit. Also sinks into people what it is and what it's not. And
Mhm.
and this is not a hype like the metaverse or a lot of other technology. This is something that's going to stick. Artificial intelligence is evolving, and now we're moving into the next level. And I think that now when we see that this kind of technology is starting to be part of your the systems or the platforms or the programs that you have been using for years, like Copilot for Microsoft, like integration with your Google suite, like the integration in the creatives from Adobe. It's just going to be something that you use to do your job better. And
Mhm.
not to kind of do the job for you, but help you with simple task, ideas, being creative, formulate this in another way, help me, take away the lamp over there from the picture. That was hard that way, from the picture. And then the next thing now that we're seeing coming is what they call interactive AI, based on the same thing, but starts to be kind of agents that you can use to survey what you're doing, and it will then suggest that, okay, I see that you are doing this extract from this database every Tuesday, then you paste it into this Excel sheet, and you create a chart that you put into PowerPoint, and you send that to someone every week. Maybe I should do that for you instead. So
Hmm.
that's, it's just going to be a powerful tool that helps you automate or be more efficient, more accurate, or give you the opportunity to understand or be presented information in a way that I like. So that's for
Hmm.
me personally. The other really interesting thing that I see and we see is that, now we're moving from the old search kind of way of doing things. You have this corporate database, and oftentimes the challenge is that you don't really know what to search for, but you know your problem, the challenge you have, and with generative AI on top of that, you can start to have a conversation with that knowledge base. So I think the common corporate brain will increase in ways that wasn't possible before. And then in a society kind of aspect, one thing is just, all this just applied to the society as a community thing, but also like, tools to help people with yeah, for instance, blind people can use, there's an app called Be My Eyes that uses the same kind of technology. You just use the camera, and it will tell you what it sees, and you
Hmm.
can connect that to other things. So it was just change the way we live our lives, that we gain information, that we do our jobs, change the way we work, I think, and interact with data in another way.
So it increases the speed that we can do our work and potentially the quality, and also potentially makes us more creative so we can come up with, generate more ideas.
Yeah, and at the end of that, one of the challenges we have today in our modern society is that we are, more and more of us are getting older and older, and there's not enough young people. We kind of the ones with the gray hair, we forgot to create enough kids, so there's a lack of resources. Skilled, trained resources within almost every sector in a lot of countries are, lacking. So how
Hmm.
are we going to kind of narrow that gap? And that will also, I think, technology be a part of helping us fixing that, and definitely, generative technology in one way or the other.
How is AI impacting the law, and what are the implications going to be for us?
Yeah. Um, I think first of all, on the as a non-lawyer, you can use it to understand what the law or the law is actually saying, because that's oftentimes a language that most of us doesn't speak.
Mm.
When you get a contract written by a lawyer, very complex thing, you can use AI to translate that into something that I can relate to, and you can have a conversation with that as well. On the other side, I think that it will not affect the law as such, but the law needs to be changed to uh, kind of follow well, that's a term I don't know in English. The law needs to be updated to apply to the way we are going to do business in the future.
Mm.
And in Europe, we have the new AI Act now being, pushed out from the European Union, a bit like when we did GDPR a few years ago, where organizations, the professional part of the society, will be held accountable. It's your responsibility to make sure that you're using this in the right way. But there will also be, new laws regulating how we can kind of communicate with one another or with a machine in a way. So that's a really complex thing. Something needs to be totally changed, and others need just to be adjusted a little bit. But it's going to be, a lot going on with laws and regulations in the years to come.
What kind of laws do you see coming, and regulation? Or maybe what kind of regulation do you think we need, especially considering that we're becoming a more global society, a global community? And I know a lot of people don't like the idea of a government body that is planetary, but it seems like something like that, or at least a layer, is coming, and it seems like AI potentially might evoke some of that, or it needs to relate in some way.
Yeah, and this is kind of a almost a interest of conflict, because up until now, for most, for humanity, it's been about being free, doing what you think is right, opportunity equal for everyone. I should be the one deciding, and a very kind of decentralized regulation. And now
Hmm.
suddenly, as I say, we see the need for global regulations, and that's going to be a huge challenge.
Hmm.
I mean, looking at the environmental challenges we have, and how many years, and they're not even there yet. They used on trying to get the world leaders agreeing on simple things like, related to an obvious thing that we need to do. And that's going to be hard. But I think that we're going to see, some regulations that apply to organizations and the professional part of the world, that we need to be responsible. And if you're not, you are going to be held accountable for that. And that could be really, really, I don't know, fee in some astronomic dimension.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's a challenge. I think it's a huge challenge, and hopefully, people in general will also kind of work together on this, because we see what is best for us. But it needs, big regulations, and it's hard to say where we're going. But we need some kind of, as you said, a global body that regulates some
Hmm.
of this. But it's going to be, hard nut to crack.
Hmm. Okay, so there's a lot of talk now about the polycrisis, the metacrisis. We've got all of these different, planetary boundaries being crossed, and environmental issues, there are ethical issues. We're entering a very complex reality where all of us are now becoming aware of all of the different dimensions of the challenges, but they're all evolving at the same time. Do you think that AI is going to help with this?
Hopefully, and that's a very good use of it as well, both to kind of regulate or help us regulate or understand what we need to do the right thing. We need AI. I read an article the other day that they're using simpler AI to control more advanced AI to make sure that it doesn't, run away in a different direction that we don't want it to. And I think we'll see the same thing for uh, helping us doing the right things as well. And I can understand that people feel that it's a bit scary. Should the
Hmm.
machines watch us? And yeah, maybe they should, or at least warn us when something looks like it's running a bit out of hand, so that people can be aware of it and then
Hmm.
help, pointing us in the right direction. And
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so yeah, I think definitely.
It's very interesting what you're saying here. So, generative AI can interpret things for us. We can use it to help make sense of complex law, or whatever we can give to it. It's really spectacular at doing this. But at the same time, we don't seem to understand what it's doing at all. It's going further and further from our understanding, and yet it's helping us be able to understand better as it gets further from us being able to understand it, which I guess seems to indicate that it's moving into a higher dimension of intelligence.
Yeah, and I read MIT. They launch every year a 10 breakthrough technologies, or technologies to kind of watch out for. And one of them, in a longer perspective, was that now we will see general AI coming. But then we start to discuss what is really general AI. Back in the days, it was, AI that was conscious and even like a superhuman being. Now they
Mm.
kind of taken away some of those things, because at the end of the day, AI in any shape or form is still just mathematics and algorithms and a machine doing stuff. And worst case, if we don't understand what it's doing, we can turn it off. And that's why they
Mhm.
also now start to come up with these examples where they use simpler AI that we really understand to control the more advanced AI. So kind of putting in some kind of breaks or boundaries for
Mhm.
the more advanced AI. And yeah, but these are complex stuff. And I have a very good friend. He is a PhD in artificial intelligence, and when he starts to kind of go on with these things, I must admit that I have a hard time following on everything that he's talking about. But it's really, really interesting, and yeah, and we need to just figure out how to do this in a very, very responsible way. And technology might be the help to kind of help us do that.
Well, maybe a human using generative intelligence is a lower dimension of intelligence controlling a higher one. So maybe it's like one level controlling another one, controlling another one, and maybe that's how this all works in the long run, huh?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and one thing is generative intelligence, because that's someone tried to explain to me once that that's like the user interface for us not non-developers
Mm-hmm.
or computer scientists to kind of make sense of complex material. The real hardcore AI, the more traditional AI, predictive AI, huge models, learning and finding patterns and doing predictions that we don't even think about, and they've been doing that for quite a while. They also need systems to kind of lower them down or keep them on a leash so they don't run away. But I don't think, and I base this on my trust in science, that we shouldn't be afraid of it running or taking over the world, because there's so many dimensions to the human mind that technology are so far from being able to do. It can
Mm-hmm.
mimic it, and it's quite good at fooling us to make it look like it has a conscience, but it doesn't. So
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes when I demonstrate things, I always kind of over exaggerate. Yeah, you know what I understand say.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thank it. I ask it something, and it comes up with an answer, and I thank you so much. That was really, really nice of you. And then I just press enter, and then it will respond. Yeah, you're so welcome. Hope it was helpful. And then there you see it. Yeah, but it's just mimicking. It's just a program. So I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind. But it will be exciting. It will be very interesting to see how far we can go within the next few years, and also what we do to kind of keep it within a controllable states.
Okay, quick action step here. So the key is learning how to prompt better. You start out prompting by just asking questions and talking to AI like it's a helper, but you quickly realize that getting better at prompting is a huge accelerator and game changer for your own success in life. So these prompts will not only help you get a lot more done faster and accelerate your success, but they'll also help you really get prompting and get better at it. You can get all of these as a gift from me just by going to metamind.co/gift. That's metamind.co/gift, and I'll put that link below, and then just opt in to get it. I've also created a powerful video for you called AI in the Future of Business and Work and Success that demonstrates some of the key mindsets and prompting strategies to help you get up to speed and get a lot more out of generative AI. And it's also included as a free gift when you register. So just head over to metamind.co/gift to get your AI Accelerator Prompt Pack and the other free goodies. All right, back to our interview. It's interesting. I also basically try to have good manners and say please and thank you. And I was going to ask you about this because, if you follow Ray Kurzweil, right, he thinks that these things are going to wake up, become self-aware, develop, other layers of intelligence and awareness. And that Mo Gadot says that we have to remember that we're training them when we interact with them. And so we need to be interacting with them the way that we want them to interact with us and the way we want them to treat us. And I think these are very good insights. And it's just, I think, good form to treat it nicely, essentially. I see some people when they're prompting, they're very kind of demanding and controlling in their prompting. And I'm thinking to myself, this just doesn't seem like it's turning you more into who you want to be as a human being to communicate that way.
And I had my podcast 30 minutes into the future, and I had a recording earlier today talking to a data scientist, and she told me that someone had tried to first they trained a AI, and that was a generative AI model
Mm-hmm.
to be unfriendly
Mm.
and quite, bad mannered. Then, and the idea was to do that, and that was not hard at all.
Hmm.
Then afterwards, they tried to retrain it, through conversation to kind of educate it to be more friendly. And that was almost impossible because then it was kind of hardwired into the core of that algorithm.
Mm.
And whatever you asked, it was always, very unpolite or yeah, just, acting bad,
Mm.
which is interesting. And I think what you're pointing at right now is it might not be the most important thing in the world in all aspects, but it
Hmm.
will, reflect how we as humans should be. So why don't we do that when, especially when you're part of if you have a corporate system that kind of trains on everyone employed within that organization, and if everyone acts bad or are very demanding or not polite, that will
Yeah.
reflect, so it's about not to please the machine, but it will at the end affect other users. And that's something that I think, as you said, we should take into account.
Hmm. Yeah. So in other words, if they train an AI to be mean and bad, at least they should make it funny.
Yeah. 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 And, and that could be, have fun filters, like, put on the Ricky Gervais filter, and it will be funny, even though it's pretty harsh sometimes. Yeah.
All right. So what skills and qualities do leaders need to be thinking about developing as we move into this future? How do we thrive in the future as leaders?
Yeah, and that was also a very interesting conversation that I had earlier today with the data scientist, because
Hmm.
uh, one of the things that leaders need to understand now is what AI is and what it's not, and how, when we create system, not necessarily generative intelligence, but any kind of intelligence, you need to remember that this is mathematics, and when we use it for making decisions, there's always some kind of risk involved, and it might be wrong, even though, the calculation said that this was the way to go. It could be wrong anyways. So,
Hmm.
we need to, even though you don't need to be a mathematician, but understand that these are systems and how they work in some, high level sense. I think that's
Hmm.
important. I also
Hmm.
think that, understanding a bit about, like you said, about digitalization, why do we do it? How should that be implemented, and how should we kind of embrace that in our organization? And we don't do it anymore just because we can. We do it because it has a purpose. And
Hmm.
what that purpose is based on, whatever you're doing in your company. But I think that, digitalization, automation, robotics, extended realities, data or data quality, and then of course artificial intelligence are maybe the 4 or 5, whatever, I think it was 5,
Hmm.
most important topics. But you're not only leading people, you're leading machines in a way as well, but people are
Hmm.
still the most important. And a lot of people find technology, a bit complicated, a bit scary maybe, and that's also a very important thing, I think, as a leader today, to kind of how can we motivate people to kind of dive into this in a responsible and smart way that will gain us, or both our organization
Hmm.
and the rest of society. So understanding more, the impact of technology in general, I think that's one of the most important skills, to be honest.
We're raising children for a future that is becoming harder and harder to have any sense of what it's going to be like. How do we prepare our children for the future that's coming?
Yeah, and that's a very, that's a very, very interesting question. And also, since a lot of us, grown-ups have a hard time understanding what's going on around us. And I think one um, understanding that we have is that we believe that young people today, they have grown up with this, so they understand it. Well, they don't know any alternatives, but they don't really
Hmm.
understand the impact of all these things that are going on. So I think that we need to,
Hmm.
be positive, learn things with kids, and give them the opportunity to use these tools in a responsible way. And maybe that's, use your common sense and be critical, from sources and what you read and see around you, because now technology can kind of trick you. Uh, and it's, it's no it's that's a hard it's a challenging thing, but it's a challenge we've had. When I grew up, the Commodore 64 came around, and my mother was terrified about it because she didn't understand it, of course. But I was lucky enough to be allowed to play with it, and I think that was a good thing because it made my curiosity about technology just grow. And so find safe environments where people or kids can play with technology and use it as the tool that it is,
Mhm.
might be the most important thing.
Eirik, what is intelligence?
And that's a very good question too, because intelligence in terms of uh, uh, when we use it in the artificial intelligence term, it was just meant to describe that someone was able to create a program or a algorithm that he had the ability to learn things. And since
Mhm.
it learned, that demanded some kind of intelligence. Intelligence is the ability to make rational choices and to be able to do everything from simple tasks to very advanced tasks, and it's just a level of intelligence. And I mean, as a human being, you need a certain amount of intelligence to be able to open a door. It doesn't mean that you're smart, but
Mm.
it's I have then the ability to understand that this is a doorknob and I can twist it and then I can open the door. That's the ability to learn from experience, I think, maybe.
Mhm. Mhm. Do you think that these intelligent, let's just say intelligences, do you think that they ever wake up at some point and become self aware or become something that is impossible to distinguish from self awareness?
As a technology optimist, I would like to say no. And if they do, I would like to say that they are very polite and secure and responsible. But honestly, I don't think that they will do that. I think that the challenge we might have in some distant future is that technology goes high wire. It's not able to kind of do take over the world, but it could do quite a bit of damage
Mm.
within a certain area. I don't think it does it because it's conscious about, it wants to kind of hurt you, but I think that's the biggest challenge we have.
Hmm. Hmm. What's the key message that you want to teach people or communicate to them or leave them
Yeah. I oftentimes now start my talks by saying that you need to learn to look beyond the obvious, because way too
with?
often when you're presented with something or experience something new that you don't understand, you have a tendency to relate that to something that you know about, and that might not be the best case. So I think that one of the things that you need to be curious to look a little bit beyond what you think the first time you see something, and try to understand, or you teach yourself to kind of try out and see, and think, fantasize a little bit about where could this technology actually take us. And that's why, as one of the examples I started with, ChatGPT, very fun. I can ask it to create a funny story or a speech that I can throw at my next dinner party, or think about Anne, the woman with the stroke who's now gotten her voice back because they use,
Mm.
among other things, generative technologies to give her voice.
Hmm. Do you have any favorite prompting techniques or prompting hacks that you use?
I try new stuff all the time, but the most rewarding, I think, thing that I've ended up using generative technologies the most for right now, that's most valuable for me, is the ability you have to have a kind of conversation with a document. there's if I find a big report, I found one now about yeah, some kind of very advanced technology into the future, and I can upload the document and I can have a conversation, summarize this for me. It gives me 10 points. Point number 3, I think, is very interesting. Can you talk more about that? Have you so kind of having that kind of conversation with the sources that I would like to dig into? That's my favorite thing to do right now.
Beautiful. Eirik, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, and me too.
So thank you for watching another Metamind AI interview. Remember to keep practicing prompting, keep learning, get our prompt pack and quick start video, watch our other videos to learn from other AI experts, and stay tuned to us here on Metamind. Stay subscribed because this is going to get really interesting.